Hi and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm talking about 5 of my top easy care houseplants. But before we get into the video, hi, my name's Alexis and this is Wild Houseplants. I'm a houseplant enthusiast and I also work as a houseplant technician, which basically means when I'm not looking after my own plants, I'm looking after other people's. If you don't follow me over on Instagram, you can find me there at Wild Houseplants. And if you do enjoy this video today, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button below. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really helps out my channel. Okay, let's talk about easy care houseplants. So what do we mean by easy care houseplants? Well, for me, easy care houseplants are houseplants I have in my collection that don't demand too much of my time. When you grow a large collection like I have, you tend to pick up a few fussy plants along the way, maybe some that need higher levels of humidity, maybe some that require special substrate to grow in, the ones that seem to be causing you grief all the time. And sometimes actually it's nice to have plants that just seem to want to grow, that seem to want to thrive, that don't demand too much of your time, and that are quite forgiving if you do maybe underwater them or overwater them from time to time. So that's the plants that I'm going to be discussing today, and let's get into the list. So first up on the list is this. This is the Rapa tetrasperma. And I actually had a bit of an accident with this plant just a few days ago, which is that when I was getting it down from where it sits in my living room, I managed to snap off a very, very long vine because this used to climb up the wall and it looked so fantastic. I'll put a video in. And yeah, that's the only downside to these plants, is that when you are trying to move them, you can quite easily snap them because they grow so fast. They grow these really super long vines. And yes, I did manage to snap it. So if you want to know how to propagate this plant, because they are fantastically easy to propagate, you can head over to my Instagram and check out one of my recent reels there where I have propagated this plant. But yeah, this plant, it grows like a weed. It's a fantastically fast grower. It's tolerant of different light conditions. I would say it probably will grow best in medium light, and that's where I have mine. So it sits about 2 meters back from a south-facing window. And like I said, these plants love to climb. I did initially put this plant on a moss pole, although I wouldn't recommend it because you're going to be extending this constantly because of how fast these plants grow. So although I'm not going to take this off this moss pole because the roots, the aerial roots have now grown into it, you absolutely don't need to put it on a moss pole. Although I would say that to get it to sort of climb up your wall, you're going to need to support it with some of those little clear clips that you can buy just off Amazon. I can put a link down below, and that will allow it to climb over your wall and create those sort of instant jungle vibes. In terms of pests, I've never had any pest issues with this plant. That's not to say that you can't get pests with this plant, because of course you can with any house plant, but it's not particularly susceptible to pests. And I've had other plants, specifically my monsteras, around this one that have had thrips, and this one hasn't got any. So that is good news from my end. It doesn't require any special humidity, and I feel like this plant just really wants to live and thrive. So yeah, I absolutely love it. 10 out of 10 from me. When it comes to substrate, mine is living in a nice aerated chunky mix. So that's a mixture of cocoa core, perlite and orchid bark, which is my standard DIY mix. And I would say I actually did try to grow some cuttings that I got from this plant in semi-hydro, and it didn't respond particularly well. So I do think this one prefers to be in soil over semi-hydro, which I don't often say that, but in my case, this has been my experience. And when it comes to repotting, these plants, despite having growing so fast, and I'll put in a picture of what this one used to look like, and I've also got another one up in my bedroom, I'll put a picture in of that. Despite how big these plants can get and how long the vines can get, the root system, in my experience, stays quite compact, so they don't need to be repotted very regularly. And I did in fact repot this plant maybe around about a year ago, and I ended up downsizing it back into a smaller pot again because it just wasn't that happy being in a bigger pot. So yeah, it's one that doesn't need to be repotted constantly, which again is another good thing as well in the old low maintenance stakes for this plant. So yeah, Absolutely love this plant. If you don't have one of these, 100% get one, or if you're just starting out in houseplants, I think this one is going to be super revarding for you. Up next, we have the Philodendron Prince of Orange, and I've not had this plant very long, but this plant is closely related to the Philodendron Congo, which I look after at a couple of clients' houses, and it is really brilliantly easy to look after. It has these huge leaves that it puts out, and it can create an impact quite quickly. This one, the Prince of Orange, obviously comes out with these bright red orange leaves, and then they fade in this orangey colour and then eventually go back to green. And I just think it's a fantastic statement plant. I think it can grow big quite quickly. And again, it's like can be quite happy in sort of medium light. The two that I look after at a client's house, neither of them are in particularly bright light, although I would say this plant will do best in indirect bright light. But yeah, I have this one in medium light at the moment, and it's doing really well. This is also fantastic value for money. I picked this one up for $14.99, which I think for the size of the plant is a really great value. Again, I've not had any issues with pests with this plant so far. So again, of course, it can get pests, but it hasn't been particularly prone. And yeah, I just think it's such a fun plant to grow, just because when these new leaves come in, look at that colour. I mean, that's just so dazzling. I love it. And yeah, they don't require any particularly high levels of humidity. They're happy in the same my normal DIY soil mix. And yeah, I think they're really rewarding to grow because they do put out quite leaves quite regularly, and so you get to see this bright orange coming through on a regular basis, which I think is super rewarding. Up next, I have this Aglaonema Maria Christina, or in fact, actually any Aglaonema will do really well for you. I really enjoy these silvery green ones. I also have a Silver Bay and a Cutlass as well, which are also very similar in this sort of colour style, but they have slightly different patterns on the leaves. But you can also get Aglaonema in reds and pinks if you really are looking for something to give you a pop of colour. I sort of say these are like the easy care versions of Calathea, because of course why we're attracted to Calathea is that beautiful foliage, but they are definitely more on the tricky side. They can get crispy leaves. They don't like to be underwatered, but they also don't like to be sitting in water. It can be quite difficult to get the balance right, and they can often look quite sad. And whereas these give you that sort of similar textured sort of wonderful foliage pattern, but they're a lot easier to look after. These guys like to dry out in between watering, so they don't demand particularly high levels of watering. And they're also really flexible in terms of their lighting conditions as well. You can grow these as a lower light plant. Obviously, you're going to see slower growth in lower light, and your leaves may well be smaller, but they can tolerate it. This one, again, grows in medium light. It grows about a metre back from a south-facing window, but it's on quite a high shelf, and it doesn't get a view of the sky. So you can see what's starting to happen is it's got a bit of a lean on. And that's because it's sort of up on a shelf and it's leaning down like that, trying to lean towards the light. So I'm not very good at rotating it, but I actually also don't really mind, because I quite like the fact that it's sort of leaning down, because it works for the sort of look of the shelf. But yes, it's definitely one that one should be rotating really. But again, I've never had pests with this plant. It's quite forgiving. If you underwater it, it will just bounce back. And yeah, they grow really fast, and they're just really wonderful to look at. So highly recommend Aglaonema, and this is the Maria Christina. Number 4 on the list is this. I call it the umbrella plant, but I believe the scientific name is Schifera. I'll put it on the screen. I'm not entirely sure of the pronunciation. This is a variegated one, but they do come in all green as well. And this is quite a small one that I picked up recently for around about, I want to say £8 or £9, so really inexpensive. And I think they have this wonderful pop of texture. I really love the leaves on this plant. I have this one living in my kitchen, which is north facing, and it sits just right next to the window ledge. and it is putting out lots of lovely little new growth here at the moment. Again, this one can be, you can let this one sort of dry out almost completely between waterings. It's really forgiving. And again, I have a bit of a situation where I haven't rotated this plant, but yes, if you rotate it, it will get lots of nice full growth all the way around. I'm obviously not very good at rotating my plants. I'm so much loving this plant that I'm going to be picking up a green version of it, just because I think sometimes you just need a plant for a corner in your home that's not going to give you any problems, but it's just going to provide like a nice pop of green and a good bit of texture as well. I would recommend staking these plants because just to support the main stem here, which is what I've done here. And yeah, again, not had any issues with pests so far. Doesn't need to be kept too moist all the time. And yeah, so far, absolutely loving this one, so highly recommend. They can also get really quite big and bushy with time, and in Feng Shui these are to bring you positivity in business and money, so fingers crossed, eh? And last but not least, I have my neon pothos or epipremnum neon. I think any epipremnum is a fantastic easy care houseplant. Obviously you've got the golden pothos, you've got marble queen, mandula, golden global green. There's lots of them and they're all absolutely fantastic. They look brilliant like this one as a training plant off a shelf, but I also have trained some cuttings of this up a moss pole, and when you do that, the leaves start to, as the plant matures, the leaves and the plant is growing, you'll notice that the leaves get bigger and bigger, which is really, really rewarding. So I'll go and show you that one in a moment. But yeah, I also just love this pop of neon green. I think it looks fantastic up against your other plants, which may be more of that sort of darker green colour. Again, all pothos are really, really forgiving with watering. You can pretty much let them dry out. They will start to wilt when they need to be watered, and they're super, super easy to propagate, so you can just make new ones all the time. Or if you have a bald section in the top of your plant, you can chop it, propagate it in water, and then stick the cuttings back into the top, and that will give you a nice full looking plant. So yeah, absolutely can't recommend these guys enough, and you can have it nice and full and trailing like this, or I will go and get my climbing one and show you that one as well. Okay, so here is my climbing neon pothos, and you can see that the leaves started the same size as the trailing one here, and as the plant has grown up, the aerial roots grow into the damp moss. You have to try and keep these damp, which I'm not always brilliant at doing, but the aerial roots grow into here and the leaves size up. Doesn't that just look fantastic? I'm absolutely in love. And this new leaf that's coming through has got a wonderful splash of green on it as well. So yeah, such a rewarding thing. And like I say, so easy to propagate. And when you have multiples of a plant, you can grow them in different ways. And I just think it's super rewarding. Okay, so that's it for this video. These are my 5 choices for easy care houseplants. Let me know if you like this kind of video, and I can absolutely do a part 2. And also let me know if you agree with any of these choices, or maybe you don't agree with these choices. But I think it's fun to have some options for easy care houseplants, which aren't always snake plants and ZZ plants. So thank you for watching today. And if you do like this video, I'd love it if you give it a thumbs up below, and I will see you in the next video. See you later.